Hey everybody, thanks for joining us here on this Tuesday, November the 9th, here on 9 News Watch for a detailed look at your Colorado weather forecast. We're also going to answer one climate-related question as we're doing throughout the month of November. Meteorologist Chris Bianchi here in the 9 News Weather Center. So, start things out with what we're seeing outside right now here in Denver. Another thing you might notice here is I've been seeing a few reports of some fog, some haze even out there. That is due to, that's actually pollution that we're seeing here at the surface. We've got a lid of warmer air just above the surface. I was just taking a look at some of the current soundings, or that's basically a profile of the atmosphere, and we've got a lid of warmer air just above the surface, and that's just trapping in all those pollutants right at the surface. So unfortunately, you might notice some of that fog, haze. That is indeed haze. That is some lousy air quality that we're seeing right now. And that air quality right now, we're seeing those that air quality index right around 90 about now. So that's, again, moderate air quality. So just might want to limit that time a little bit outdoors later on today. That said, it is a bit warmer for us later on today. We're going to mix down some of that warmer air from above us down to the surface. So long story short, we'll probably pop on up into low 60s later on this afternoon for us here in Denver. For context, we're at an average high of 56 for this time of year. So when we're talking about low 60s, that is running about 5, 6, 7 degrees above average for this time of year. Mountain snowfall, that'll be a story as we get later on through this afternoon and tonight. So if you're heading up, especially some of those mountain passes along in North of I-70, Rabbit Ears Pass, Berthoud Pass, Vale Pass, the Eisenhower Tunnel, that's where you're going to be looking at some very tricky travel. And then here in Denver, we're trying to find some snow, but it does not look like we're going to have much in the way of any snow chances over the next few days. I'll get more detail on that as well here over the next few minutes. Current temperatures right now, we're looking at a lot of 50s for us here along the eastern plains. Again, Denver 52. Yesterday we topped out at 54, so already here as of 10 a.m., Denver at 52 gives you an idea that we're certainly going to be, we're on pace. We're on pretty solid pace to be getting up into the low 60s, mountains 30s, and 40s, and you might notice the temperature fairly similar in the mountains compared to the eastern plains. I mentioned what's leading to some of that pollution here in Denver. Because those temperatures are fairly equal, yeah, you go above us. If you were to go above the sky here in Denver, the temperature would be about the same as it is at the surface, if not a bit warmer. And that's why, again, some of those higher elevation places like, say, Kremling and Buena Vista, Telluride are at, if not a bit warmer than Denver is currently. Current temperature downtown Denver 48, 56 in Centennial, 57 Evergreen, 48 Boulder, 49 Longmont. So again, generally speaking, a lot of upper 40s, low 50s, a few spots a little bit warmer than that. Now Denver, we're going to get up into the low to mid 60s later on this afternoon. A pretty nice day all in all. We'll probably notice a little bit of increasing high cloud cover later on this afternoon and to the early evening time frame. That'll be ahead of our next storm system that will, as has been the trend all fall along, will completely miss Denver and lead to some snowfall for us into the mountains. But again, for us here in Denver, we're going to get some of those dry, downsloping winds. Those will keep us on the warmer side, but again, that'll mean we miss out on any rain or snowfall. The mountain's much cooler later on tonight, tomorrow, because we're going to be having a lot more cloud cover up that way. So forecast highs for tomorrow. Denver, we get the benefit of those downsloping winds, so we're still in the mid to upper 50s. Probably a bit more cloud cover for tomorrow compared to today. But again, for tomorrow, the mountains will be significantly cooler and also perhaps a bit windier. Now, wind's not an issue for us along the Front Range or eastern Colorado right now. You'll probably notice those winds cranking on up, though, as we get later on through tonight in some of the foothills, especially along and west of the Continental Divide, western Boulder County, as well as into Clear Creek County, down through Park County and western parts of Larimer County. You'll notice those winds revving on up. That is due to the next storm system that'll be moving its way into our region, and that'll lead to some of that snowfall. But again, just keep in mind, you might be looking at some stronger winds in some of those higher elevations. Snowfall, well, we're going to get some of that certainly for us here into the mountains later on today and tonight. And as has been the case, again, all fall long, Denver, we just really don't get much of anything. We'll get some clouds, maybe a spot sprinkle in a few spots along the urban corridor. That'll about do it. But again, the mountains, we'll get a pretty good helping of snowfall. And you know what? We're going to get into more details on the Denver snow drought here in just a second. I know it hasn't snowed yet, and that's getting pretty crazy at this point. That hasn't snowed yet. It's November the 9th, and we're approaching a record. But the saving grace for us here into Colorado is that the mountains where we really do need the snowfall, we are getting it. We've had a pretty good start to the snow season for our friends in the mountains, and that will continue with our next storm system. So we get some snow tonight. Just keep in mind, If you're traveling overnight tonight after dark, and keep in mind dark now, we're talking about before 5 o'clock. If you are traveling from kind of 5, 6 o'clock on from I-70, say Idaho Springs on west, Highway 40 on up into the mountains, again, Berthoud Pass, Rabbit Ears Pass, it is going to be a pretty nasty drive overnight tonight. So if you can push that back to tomorrow night, it'll be a lot better tomorrow night than tonight, but just keep in mind, if you're traveling up that way, it is going to be slick travel, no doubt about that. Still a few lingering snow flurries tomorrow night, but again, a lot calmer compared to what we're expecting for this overnight time frame. And early on your Wednesday morning, we'll still have a few snow showers trapped into the mountains as we get into your Friday as well. Now, Denver, as I mentioned, nothing, not a zip, zilch, nothing for us here in the Denver area. Maybe a few snow showers you get on up to kind of Nederland and on west into Georgetown, again, Clear Creek County, western Boulder County, some of those typical spots that may be might get a little bit of snowfall, but again, for most of us, we're going to be looking at just kind of cloudy conditions as we get later on through today and overnight. Now, the area with the highest concern for snowfall, we have a winter weather advisory for us into the Parks and the Elkin Mountains. That would be Steamboat Springs and even down into parts of the Flat Tops. Glenwood Springs on north do have a winter weather advisory above 9,000 feet. 4 to 8 inches of snow expected out that way, but again, tricky travel will be the big concern, and that does once again include in particular Rabbit Ears Pass. That will be a pretty slippery drive overnight and to early tomorrow, though we'll still have some snow showers tomorrow night. It shouldn't be nearly as bad tomorrow night. Snow forecast, again, generally speaking, 4 to 8 inches for the northern mountains, but everyone gets a little bit of snow. Notice Telluride, Gunnison getting some snowfall, so the San Juans, the West Elks seeing maybe 2 to 4, 3 to 6 inches worth of snowfall. The I-70 mountains, the Summit County mountains, the skiers up there will love that, about 3 to 6 inches probably for those areas. So again, just overall getting a decent little helping of snowfall. We will take it. That will continue our solid start to the snow season. We're at or above where we should be in terms of snowpack throughout the mountains. So again, Denver, no snow. The goose eggs continue for us here into the Denver area in terms of snowfall, but the mountains, at least we are getting snow. Now, a bit more about that average first snow for us here into Denver. That on average takes place on October the 18th. And probably don't have to tell you that we just have not seen that at all here. No snow, no measurable snow for us here into the Denver area so far here into our winter season. But we do have the chance for maybe a little bit of snow on Friday morning. Doesn't look all that likely at this point. And then maybe middle of next week. But we're going to make a pretty good run at that November the 21st, 1934 record. That is the current record for the latest first measurable snowfall on record into Denver. We have never gone through all of September, October, and November without a measurable snow in Denver. It's way too early to say about that, but it is worth noting that the December the 1st is 3 weeks from today. So if we do get through the next few weeks without any measurable snowfall, we could be knocking on December's door without any measurable snowfall, which is unbelievable to be talking about that. And anybody who's spent any sort of longer time, anybody joining us who's spent any sort of longer time period here into Denver knows just how unusual it is to go throughout the fall without any measurable snowfall out this way. Tomorrow it's kind of cool for us into Denver, a bit cooler than today. Highs in the mid to upper 50s, nothing crazy about that. Again, that's where we should be for this time of year. And that 7-day forecast tomorrow, 58. Then we drop back to 54 with a scattered rain, maybe snow shower for us on Thursday. So Thursday, we'll call it a 10% or less chance that we see some measurable snow into Denver, maybe into Friday morning. But again, those temperatures, they're just too warm, and it'll be very nice this weekend. Enjoy the nice weather, but don't want to be too ominous about it, but this is, again, this is a mid-October forecast that we're showing you here into the early to middle part of November once again for us here into the Denver area. So that'll about do it in terms of the weather discussion here. Do want to get into some of those climate-related questions. We're taking one every day for us here on 9 News Watch throughout the month of November, and I want to kind of show you here this chart that I've made. So this is going to relate to the question we've got here from Eleanor in Wellington, which is just the north of Fort Collins. Eleanor writes in about some comparisons between Fort Collins and Wellington in terms of weather over the years. So long story short, I think Eleanor seeking some context about what we've seen over the last 50 years and whether or not we're seeing some changes in our day-to-day weather due to climate change? And the quick answer is yes. Now, you can see in Fort Collins specifically, and Denver's about the same, about 2.5 degree temperature differential over the long term versus the last 30 years. The 48.4 degree temperature, that is Fort Collins' average temperature going back to the late 1800s. In the last 30 years, from 1990 to 2020, it is 50.8 degrees. So that's a 2.4 temperature differential. A lot of you who might be watching, and again, something I've been kind of trying to emphasize as well. If you've been watching and you say 2 degrees, it's not that big of a deal. It really is a big deal, because normally the climate is always changing, and we've had some questions about that as well, and that's certainly true. The climate always does change, but it changes much more slowly than that. If we have, going back millions, billions of years, the climate does change, but it tends to be much more incremental. We see some very, very subtle changes, 1/10 of a degree, 2/10 of a degree over 100 years. Maybe, and again, more extreme scenarios, 3/10 of a degree over 100 years. Not, again, going back to this, in a 100-year span, we're talking about a 2.4 degree temperature differential. And by the way, that is exponentially increasing. So that gap, if we were to measure this out over the next 100 years, if things continue the way they are, we'd be talking about a 5, 6, 7 degree temperature differential. And again, that's starting to get to the point now where you're probably noticing that on a day-to-day basis. And one potential anecdotal example, and it's hard to verify anything in terms of day-to-day weather in the context of climate change, but one thing I would say is back over the weekend, you might remember that Denver hit 80 degrees back on Saturday. The overall meteorological conditions behind that were not that exceptional. It would, without climate change, there's no doubt that Saturday would have been a warm day. There's no doubt about that, right? Climate change doesn't make a warm, it doesn't take a cold day and make it warm, right? It just takes perhaps a warm day, a day that might have been 100 years ago, 77 degrees, and made it 79, 80 degrees this past weekend. So it's some of those subtle differences that you might notice, and also it's perhaps turned a bit drier for us in eastern Colorado and southern Colorado in particular over the last 100 years. So Eleanor, hopefully, again, I know you asked specifics about Wellington versus Fort Collins. I would just say that in general, we have leaned drier and we have leaned warmer over the last 100 years. And that doesn't mean we don't get snow. That doesn't mean we still don't get huge snowstorms. Doesn't mean sometimes we could drop to 20 degrees below zero. That can all still happen. It's just, again, it's more some of those subtle impacts to your day-to-day weather. And then there's some perhaps other impacts that we still don't know about that may be taking place on a wider context in the weather. We don't know the impact, for example, of climate change on the jet stream, or taking bigger storms and perhaps making them stronger, because warmer air can hold more moisture, adds more energy to the atmosphere. So when you have a warmer climate, you have better chances for seeing maybe even big snowstorms. Ironically, we may be getting more snow in some cases because, again, the atmosphere is warming on up. So again, Eleanor, hopefully that explains your question. And for everyone for joining us here on 9 News Watch, we really do appreciate it. And join us here tomorrow as we again delve into your detailed Colorado weather forecast and also take a climate change related question. Have a great rest of your day.